Okay, so today we're talking about material for the new exam, talking about chapter 25, chapter 21, excuse me. Wrong class.
Okay.
About the world after Napoleon, the 19th century Europe. About how Europe is reacting to the Napoleonic Wars and the French Revolution. Talk about the Congress of Vienna, Prince Clemens von Metternich, the idea of conservatism, the concert of Europe, the Greek revolt, the Treaty of Adrianople, Charles X, the King of France, May 24 to 30, two of the czars of Russia, Alexander I, followed by Nicholas I. How about looking at the Latin American independence movements? The figures of Jose Bonifacio, Simon Bolivar, the Jamaica letter, Mexico, the War of Independence, Father Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla, and Grito de Dolores. The Y in Spanish, it pronounces E, means and. Okay, any questions on those? Okay.
So much cooler back then.
Oh, yeah.
Say that again?
She said,
Things were so much cooler back then.
Oh.
so, naming my kids, we try to make sure something sounded dignified.
The names we have these days are not more cool than those.
Okay. So, 1815, Napoleon is under lock and key at St. Helena, far out of anyone's grasp, far away from any hope of escape or reprieve, and Europe is delighted by that. So Europe is basically trying to turn the clock back to 1786. Trying to basically undo the French Revolution, all the damage been done to society, all these nations, and particularly the existing political order of Europe. How do we undo that? How do we prevent another French Revolution from occurring? Because that now is the thought, the fear that is uppermost in the minds of all the kings of Europe, that is, what if what happened in France happens in my country? What if the people rise up and come after me? Naturally, very few of us want to see our heads detached from our bodies, and of course the European monarchs are much the same in that regard. They want to avoid revolution. They want to avoid a civil war, an uprising that could leave them dead or in exile. And they especially want to keep that from happening in another country, keep that from spreading to their country or another Napoleon from coming to power. So the Treaty of Vienna, which said had ended the Napoleonic Wars. Page 638, we see the results of the treaty, the new borders of Europe. So the old Holy Roman Empire was revived as the Germanic Confederation. So no more Holy Roman Emperor. But essentially this group, the Congress of Vienna, it's basically their job to be able to enforce and write up the terms of the treaty. To make sure France is following through their end of the bargain. Basically helping smooth everything over. Now it's not a formal law-making body, it's just Congress, in this case just simply means meeting.
Excuse me.
Basically it's just a group of diplomat meetings, more like a convention. Except no Shriners or anything. Except, of course, the old joke, what's the opposite of progress? Congress. Too soon. Essentially, overall, their idea is to restore the old order. The Alcine regimes, as much as they can, basically keep lid on all this revolution, all these Enlightenment ideas. Look at all the liberal ideas coming out of the French Revolution, the American Revolution. These ideas of government by the people, civil liberties, bills of rights, constitutions, representative government. They don't want that. They want power as absolute as it possibly can. In this case, not just for the sake of having power, but to keep it from falling into other hands of people who are less stable and less reliable, and keep chaos from engulfing Europe once again. So into all this, we have this guy, Prince Clemens von Metternich. He is the Austrian foreign minister. He's in charge of Austria's foreign policies. And basically it's, like I say, he's a prince, but he's too far removed from the line of succession to ever be emperor of Austria. But he believes in this idea of basically preserving order and control as much as possible, trying to keep a lid on any kind of revolutionary activity in Europe. People have had a taste of power, they've had a taste of freedom, they like it. And they're afraid it's going to be hard to get the genie back in the bottle. But Metternich's going to do whatever he can to make sure that happens. Go to page 637, there's a portrait of him. I see the guy sitting on the right here. Mr. Excitement himself. $637. And the new map of Europe on 638. Basically, his idea is to keep peace and stability, restore and retain what are called legitimate monarchs. That's his watchword here, legitimacy. Legitimacy in government. Of course, basically the mean is legitimate governments, which is hereditary monarchies. That the royal families of Europe would control Europe. And they'd stay in control of Europe. The nation, the monarchies of Europe would help these monarchies stay in power no matter the cost. But of course, there's legitimacy and there's legitimacy. Some monarchs are just, all monarchs are legitimate, but some are considered more legitimate than others. Basically, they're ignoring France's point. Just basically, France is kind of a social pariah, kind of keeping it out of the foreign affairs of Europe. Basically, even though it's back to a constitutional monarchy under Louis XVIII, France basically doesn't have to earn its place back in the order of Europe again. And part of how they're going to maintain legitimacy is the concept of the balance of power. That no one country is going to be so powerful they can start overpowering all the others, not like France can. Consider the four major powers after the Napoleonic Wars: Prussia, Austria, Russia, and the United Kingdom, that's Great Britain. Now, all four of these countries have added to their holdings to some extent through the Treaty of Vienna. But none gaining so much that they're going to end up losing, gaining so much that they'll end up being able to overpower everybody else. It was basically Russia and Britain, they're balance of power against Central Europe. Prussia and Austria are balanced against each other because they're relatively evenly matched. Prussia, Austria, and Russia together would balance against Britain or France or Western Europe. Basically, no one so powerful they can't overpower someone, all these others. Essentially, monarchs are going to maintain legitimacy and order through fear of massive retaliation. The idea they cannot overpower someone else. And they're going to work together to accomplish those ends, because they all believe in the idea of legitimacy. They all believe in the idea of maintaining order at all costs. It's basically mutual self-interest, kind of forced into an alliance.
Yeah, they're gonna act right because they all know they can potentially keep each other alive.
Exactly. It's basically that fear that's going to keep Europe in a relative state of stability for the next century. After 1815, what's the next major war in Europe? World War I, 1914. Basically, you have pretty much a century of stability. You have some little wars here and there, but they're over in a couple of months. Nothing too big. Nothing disrupting the major order of Europe. So things stay pretty calm overall. So overall, these ideas of legitimacy and order, it's the concept of conservatism. And the idea comes from Edmund Burke, an English philosopher who had written a book in 1790 called Reflections on the Revolution in France. Essentially, at this point in the French Revolution, so basically the people have taken to the streets, they've overthrown the absolute monarchy. Louis XVI has agreed to a constitutional monarchy. It's a great triumph for the power of people over oppression. And it's essentially going very well for France at this point. This is before the revolution spirals out of control.
So a constitutional monarchy is like the people elect, but it's one ruler, or?
Yeah, it's kind of like the same system that England has. It's elected parliament, elected assembly basically makes the laws for the people, but you have a monarch, a hereditary monarch, who's basically supposedly head over all. Hit figurehead, maybe a little bit of power, but not very much. Basically, the people are making most of the decisions.
And this is conservatism?
No, that's liberalism. See, remember, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, they're liberal. Basically, they believed in change. They believed in this idea of freedoms and liberties for the people. Conservatism, Edmund Burke is looking at this 1790 saying, this is not a triumph, this is a disaster. This is going to turn out horribly for the world.
Constitutional monarchy?
Constitutional monarchy, the revolution in France said, unless you have absolute order and absolute control, the whole system's going to fly out of control. You're going to have anarchy.
So you're saying that's conservatism back in anarchy?
Yeah. Conservatism, kind of get to it, is conservatism is the belief that that kind of sudden change is disastrous. That you don't want change. And that,
So
yeah.
order at all costs.
Yeah. And Burke really upset a lot of people when he made a reference to the French Revolution. The people in the streets, as he called it, a swinish multitude. They said it's a bunch of pigs. That really upset a lot of people. And the idea, though, it really took off in the late after the Napoleonic Wars. Conservatism was the way to go. Avoid change, that is, keep a traditional system intact. Burke believed that the government contracted the people, as those espoused by such people as John Locke and others, a social contract, it was binding on all generations. And people could not just arbitrarily change it through election or through a popular revolution or whatever else. Basically, that social covenant is set and cannot change. Sudden change unacceptable. But overall, Burke's vision of classical conservatism becomes this. Obedience to political authority and organized religion. Organized religion is crucial to social order. Basically, maintains social and political order. Some modest changes are possible under this system, but only within the existing framework of governments. Basically, the whole generation after Violent wars into the 1830s, basically dominated by this idea. No change. Keep things as they are. Essentially a reaction back against classical liberalism.
So even though America was so young, it was way ahead of Europe now.
So they took these ideas from the Americans and just adapted them, but basically.
Yeah, America really had inspired a lot of the world in terms of this kind of political ideology. America has shown that classical liberalism does work. Representative system does work. France tried to expand on that, but the revolution spiraled out of control and ended up had this massive backlash against the existing political order of Europe, instituting a system of conservatism. So basically, you're conservative, you don't like change. That's what conservatism is. Liberalism, change can be good, change is positive, change is necessary. But overall, belief in civil liberties, due process. Essentially, it's like I said in the French Revolution, freedom is anything that is the right to do anything you want so long as you don't hurt anybody else. That's the liberal idea. If it's not hurting anybody else, what difference does it make? Live life on your own terms.
It's ironic that that's the idea that inspired so much thought.
Yeah. I think of so many great ideas and thoughts based on peace and equality that inspire so much warfare. Christianity based on the idea of universal love, brotherhood, and salvation, love thy neighbor. But how many people have gone to war in the name of Christianity? How many other religions added on peace have declared war in the name of their religion? Essentially, men like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they are classical liberals. Basically, the idea that the needs of the people are important in a government, but overall their freedoms are as well. Conservatism, said here, it's traditionalism. To avoid change at all possible. They're conservatives who like things the way they are. That's traditional conservative.
It's comfortable.
That people are comfortable with the ideas they're around, because basically, think about how you live, how you grew up. To you, that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way things should be. Like I said, a lot of people are comfortable with that. Like I said, change is often uncomfortable for a lot of us because it means we have to give up a lot of habits. We have to change our way of thinking. So we don't like being told that it's something we believe might be wrong. My God, that can't be right. That can't be right. I'm comfortable with this idea. It cannot be wrong because I'm comfortable with it. But growth, change, that's difficult for a lot of people. So think about your education. You're learning your classes, you're growing as people, but it's not an easy process. But it's one you have to do. You have to change, you have to grow. So would you rather be the person you are today, or the person you envision in 5 years, or would you rather be the little 9 or 10-year-old version of you in a 20-year-old body? Or that's my case.
Yeah. Well, it is what's comfortable for you.
Yeah.
What's comfortable.
But there are kind of differences here and there. You have, politically, you have moderates are kind of in the middle here. Some change good, some change bad, just kind of wait back and forth. But there are extreme ends of both of these. Radicalism is a more, except extreme change is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter the cost, you're going to change something. Change the entire system just for the sake of changing it.
So that's more revolution.
So that's
Yeah,
where-
pretty much revolutionary.
That's revolutionary.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, French Revolution was born in liberalism and changed to radical, especially when you get to the Legislative Assembly and National Convention.
So they were just like, this sounds new and cool, we
Yeah.
need to do this. We're going to kill people that don't want to do it.
Yeah. So it's new, it's edgy, it's in. So you don't like what we want, we're going to kill you. Revolution for the sake of revolution. Like,
I wonder if
man.
it started by teenagers.
yeah. But the other end of conservatism. Reactionaries. Like I said, the reactionary believes that, yes, there must be change, but change back to an old system. Undo what has been done. So you're not changing anything, you're undoing it. You're going backwards in time.
Politics is complicated.
So that's what Edmund Burke was
Yeah.
wanting, kind of.
In a way. So that's the way all these guys in Congress get on Internet for wanting. They're reactionaries. They're extreme conservatives.
You want to be smart, which I know if you run as a moderate, so you can pull from each category, kind of.
Yeah, in fact, that's basically how a lot of American politics works today is since we have a lot of moderates, people kind of in between the two, and that's what the two major parties basically fight for in the election, is that moderate core saying, we're going to offer some change, some things you'll enjoy, some things you like, some things you've been in favor of and calling for.
Why do
So
they,
keep some things intact.
why do they have the, primaries like in February or March or whatever, that they don't have that till the first and next year? Like, what is that?
Why do we have the primaries so early? Well, basically, in Arkansas, the primaries used to be in May, and actually in the old days, they actually used to be in like July. But essentially, it's because of the presidential election. All these states wanted to rush forward and basically help choose who the nominee for the different parties are going to be. So they put everything as early in the year as possible before anybody else can start. And so as a result, you have to wait 8 months between March and November before you finally decide on the general election.
So why don't you do like the state offices the same time you do the presidential, like, would that be, what's that?
Actually, yeah, this election was just the primary. Basically, the parties were deciding who their candidates for these
So
offices.
that's part of like local offices, so like sheriff and stuff.
Like I say, in the sheriff's race, like I said, there were no Republicans running. All there was just 2 Democrats running. And so the Democratic Party, members of the Democratic Party who were declaring themselves to be part of the Democratic Party, were voting for who the Democratic Party candidate was going to be.
Right.
and there's no Republican candidate in Union County Falls, so it's just who won that primary last night. That is who wins. It's the new sheriff.
Is that done by, I noticed that as well, is that done by strategy? Because I know this is, I mean, El Dorado is probably a pretty conservative area.
Yeah, there were a lot of people basically decided they were more interested in the local races, like for a tax collector, for a sheriff, than they were in any of the Republican presidential candidates. So they voted for the local candidates because at the local level, county offices are all Democrats. Like I said, the cities just kind of depends on where you're at, But the political science terms are called presidential Republicans. They're Democrats in the primaries for local offices, but because of issues at the federal level, they're going to vote Republican in the national election.
When can you vote for like the presidential election? When does it start?
Presidential elections, those are all, November elections are always first Monday after first Tuesday in November. I think that's November 8th this year. But you'll be able to vote 2 weeks before then. And everybody on the dog's going to be on TV telling you it's time to vote. So.
Charles Crossheimer said it's going to be the next Waterloo come Thursday.
So, yeah, it's very interesting to see what's going to happen here in the next few weeks.
I came in late, so I didn't catch it all, but Hillary versus Sanders and stuff, is that still neck and neck, basically?
Hillary,
She won.
she won most of the primary. She's taking a pretty good lead in the delegates. It's
Right.
basically, it looks like it's coming down to, so far at this point, it's going to be Trump against Clinton.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
And not a lot of people enthusiastic about either candidate, but like I say, you think the race has been nasty at this point, you just wait till about August or September. Like I say, they haven't even started to go negative on Trump yet.
You said, what about Donald Trump?
And so they haven't started to go negative on Trump yet.
Wow.
They're gonna do so much stuff on Sunday, right?
But
And he still might be president. Donald Trump.
there's a chance.
Everyone else.
Yeah. But I'd say Trump and Clinton are leading. Is there a chance another candidate could win one of those nominations? It's possible, but their window of opportunities are closing rapidly.
Because didn't Barack Obama lose by however much in Super Tuesdays in 08?
Oh yeah. Basically, Hillary Clinton actually won most popular votes in the 2008 election, but she lost the states where she needed. She lost. She didn't get most of the delegates, and it's a national election based on delegates. Democrats dole out their delegates proportionally, so as long as you get close in these primaries, you're still in it. Except Bernie Sanders.
No.
Really, he doesn't.
He went the way this
Yeah.
They were saying that Bernie Sanders, he knows he's not going to get elected. He's basically trying to push his idea to kind of leave a legacy on what his ideas want to be. Because so if he says, if he pushes a certain agenda, it'll force Hillary Clinton to push that same agenda because she don't want the same voters come on her side. So she'll have to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
Well, there's a lot of Bernie supporters that if Bernie doesn't get elected, the nominee, they said they're not going to vote at all or vote for Trump because that's how much they don't like Hillary.
Of course, somebody's going to vote for Bernie Sanders, and a valid socialist is not going to turn around and vote for Donald Trump. Like I said, they're just upset right now. Like I say, in any general election, they've done a lot of studies of this. You only have about 5% of either party is going to turn and vote for the other candidate, but somebody's worried about income inequality is not going to vote for a multi-billionaire.
Right.
Right. We need to sit down somewhere. Sit down.
I'd say, and there are a lot of people who like Trump because of his personality. Sometimes people vote just because they like who that person is, no other reason. Sometimes they like the issues.
He had a lot of liberal ideas. I mean, he's probably the most liberal conservative running.
In many ways he is, but of course he's been all over the map, so kind of hard to pin him down, so.
He could be the worst thing that ever happened, or he might not be that bad.
But of course he's endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan, that kind of tells you a lot right there. And say he's not getting a lot of votes from a third ward over that one.
Yeah. He shouldn't. He disavowed them, or whatever you want to call it, but he should have did it right off the bat.
On his Twitter, he keeps retweeting white supremacist groups. I don't know if he realizes it, but it's white supremacist groups. Donald Trump.
Yeah.
They'll tweet him statistics and stuff, and he'll be like, "Oh yeah, I agree." Retweet.
But of course all this goes back to all these political ideas too, is people in a democratic system, or any system where the power of the people is important, they're going to vote for different reasons. Sometimes these grandiose reasons, they want this important idea put into place. They believe in big ideas, but of course elections are always fought in the gutter. And then you have those who vote just because they like personalities. They like how this guy looks. They like that guy's name. They couldn't pronounce this guy's name, so they're voting for one they can pronounce. So it sounds very superficial reasons. But and then you have people who vote because candidates give someone to blame. They don't like their lot in life, but this guy says it's because of these people or this group, and they'll vote because of that. Somebody once asked my grandfather why there was so much racism and hate in the world. I said, because everybody needs somebody to look down on. And Grandpa Jack was a very important point for that. Sometimes people, they would rather have somebody to look down on or to change their situation in life. They'd rather have someone to blame for the problems than take responsibility for it. Yeah. So basically, some people believe personal responsibility, but it only belongs to other people. And that's we're getting into these different ideas here. Reactionaries, undo change. Basically, turn back the clock. Undo what's been changed to go back to a more traditional idea, this mythic past. Like the idea, things are so much better back in. That's a reactionary. And you see a lot of that, these extreme reactionary movements in like Italy and Germany in the 1920s, 1930s. Things are so much better before all this. So we undo all that this has done and go back to their traditional ideas through this. And then, of course, you have, beyond that, fascism and authoritarianism. So, no civil liberties. Traditional order at all costs. And traditional order enforced by an authoritarian state, by dictatorship. Basically, complete social and religious and ideological conformity.
It'd be hard to make that happen in the United States, though, right? Dictatorship? Since you have so many balance, I mean, unless they wanted that, basically. Do you have so many balances of power?
Yeah, there's so many balances of power that's very hard to do in the United States.
It's always happen really slowly. You just have to make people stupider and stupider and stupider over time.
Like I say, could a dictatorship happen in the United States? It's possible if you convince enough people over time and do it slowly. Basically, it's the price of living in a republic, which means you can't just simply sit back and let everybody else do it. It means you have to do something about it. It's more than just you voting on election day. You have to stay involved in the issues. You have to watch the news. You have to read newspapers. You have to contact your elected officials about bills that are coming up. You have to contact them about issues that are important to you. And don't depend on someone else to take care of it. Because yes, it could be manipulated and taken away. Because remember, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany. They still had an elected parliament. But no other parties were allowed to vote in it, except the Nazis.
There was an online, like one of these kind of social experiment groups went out recently, and they read quotes to Trump supporters and claimed that these were Trump quotes. And what do you feel about that? And they're all like, oh yeah, these are great, I love Trump. They were actually quotes from Adolf Hitler.
Kind of ambush journalism, but I say, when somebody said, the problem with American media today is it's so hyper-condensed. It's got 24 hours of news, but it's the same 1 hour of news repeated over and over again, and everybody talking about it over and over again, hitting the same points over and over and over. Basically, it's reduced to 15 and 30-second sound bites. Basically, can you reduce your idea to 2 or 3 sentences? And problem is, most of the American public, great many millions of people, like I said, they don't really pay attention to what's going on. They just attach the name to it.
It's like propaganda.
Yeah.
Right.
Just attach the name to it, and they don't really think about the consequences of it. Okay, some guy says, let's bomb living daylights out of this country, okay? Now I think 2 or 3 moves down the line, what happens because of that? On the other hand, it's radicalism. You have socialism, an extreme form of radicalism. Basically, it's government control of the ownership of certain industries. And often reduced civil liberties. And communism, basically, total conformity to an ideal, no civil liberties,
So basically, if you vote
government control of everything.
Bernie Sanders, that's one step closer to communism.
Okay, Sanders is a socialist.
It looks like that's where America's going, is towards socialism.
Yeah, so a lot of Europe has very socialist tendencies. Like I say, remember, it's socialism, though, it says government needs to own the telephone companies. Government needs to own the electric companies. Government needs to own the banks. And so there's a difference between that and saying, okay, governments have to ensure the deposits of their customers, make sure that they don't lose their money. This industry cannot dump this toxic waste in the city drinking supply. That's not socialism. It's liberalism. But notice the similarity between communism and fascism. Different in ideology, different in promoting, but the social outcome is basically the same. Total conformity, no civil liberties, absolute control by the government. So basically, the furthest extremes of the political spectrum, actually the closest. The widest differences are right here.
That's a really cool discussion. I've never seen it like that.
Extreme left, extreme right. Basically, these extremists, extreme ends, it's authoritarianism. Now, all these ideas going into this. This one's the dominant one here in after 1850. In Congress of Vienna, you have the Concert of Europe. Like I say, Concert of Europe, it's not a bunch of bands getting together and playing in Berlin one night. Some people think that. But basically, it's the 4 major powers working together to enforce this idea of order and legitimacy. You're talking this early period, these first 15 to 20 years after Napoleon, think the words order, legitimacy. So the concert of Europe, there's this idea of Europe working together, comes together in what they call the Quadruple Alliance. Quadruple Alliance, which is Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia.
Would it be known Concert of Europe or Quadruple Alliance?
Yeah, more formally it's the Quadruple Alliance, but basically Europe working together, this idea. So they're working in different ways.
What's the first one? Austria, Russia, Austria.
Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia. Prussia is going to be the leading force in unifying Germany, but you don't have a Germany yet. And you can see it on page 638 in the book. So the Concert of Europe, they make periodically conferences, discuss common interests, how to maintain peace and order in Europe, that is, legitimacy. Eventually, though, with the 1820s, France has rehabilitated itself enough that it's added in as the Quintuple Alliance.
Really?
And so they're one of the group again. All's forgiven. As Louis XVIII and his successor Charles X. Well, France is all gung-ho about this Concert of Europe idea. So doing whatever they can to get into the group and go along. And France, under its new monarchs, is saying that the great powers of Europe have the right to intervene and restore legitimacy throughout Europe. So basically, not only keep other countries from being affected, but intervene to prevent these revolutions and keep them from spilling outward. It's to keep legitimate governments being overthrown. Well, that kind of gets Britain upset here. Because they've had several civil wars, several uprisings where they've had to throw out dictatorial kings. The English Civil War of the 1640s, they kick out Charles I in favor of Parliament. 1689, the Glorious Revolution, they kick out James II, and Parliament brings in a new king and queen. They're thinking, well, what if we have to go through something like that again? We don't want France or Austria jumping in here into England and telling us what to do. So England kind of balks about it. So, but the other four, though, use their powers and the idea of legitimacy to defeat uprisings in places like Spain and like Italy. Like I said, there's legitimacy and there's legitimacy. We go to Greece. Greece had been under Turkish control for about 400 years by this point. Yeah, the Ottoman Empire. So it's pretty well established. In fact, Ottoman control had been over Greece longer than most of the royal families of Europe had been in power. And of course, the Greeks hated the Turks with a passion. They still don't like each other too much, even though they're NATO allies. They don't really like each other too much. Well, in 1821, Greece rises up in this violent revolution against the Turks. They're going to get rid of the Turks no matter what. They have their own country, their own independence. They're going to have their own say again. Like I said, essentially, they want self-determination. They're united by this common idea of this common Greek heritage and culture. They speak the Greek language. So they're Greek Orthodox. The Turks, they are Muslim. They speak Turkish. They don't care about Greece. Basically, what can Greece supply to them in terms of dollars and cents and tribute? So essentially, it's the forces of nationalism coming to the fore. Basically, a Greece not united by a common figure, common government, or common king, but the idea of this common heritage they have. All those factors they have in common besides the government. In this case, everything is not Turkish. Well, Europe is very sympathetic to the cause because 1700s and 1800s, Europe had kind of rediscovered all these Greco-Roman classics. Europe had kind of fallen in love with ancient Greece. All great works of great scientists, thinkers, and poets. It inspired a lot of the architecture of Europe at the time. Basically, a real romanticism about ancient Greece, and so there's a lot of sympathy for that. This is where European civilization began, in Greece. And so they want to nudge it along and help it become independent once again. So Europeans are donating a lot of money to the cause. And so eventually, Britain and France decide they're going to help the Greeks a little bit further. Basically get into the revolution on the Greek side. So they send their navies after the Turks, basically to keep them from landing reinforcements in Greece. In 1827, the British and the French fleets freed the Turkish armada off the Greek coast. And then by 1828, Russia gets involved. Russia basically invades the Turkish-held areas here of southeastern Europe. Look here on page 638, area between the Dniester and the Danube, of course what is now Romania, Wallachia, Moldavia. Basically because Turkey is so bogged down here in Greece, they really couldn't defend Wallachia and Moldavia. So the Russians are able to just move right in. So in 1829, Turkey agrees to the Treaty of Adrianople, basically ending the Greek revolt. And so it happens as a result of it. Wallachia, Moldavia become Russian protectorates. Basically still Turkish, but they have to do what the Russians say in those areas. Basically it's Russian in all but name. Greece gets its independence. Basically what is now southern Greece, the southern half of here's around what happened in Sparta and Athens. 29, the Treaty of Adrianople. This is what ends the Greek revolt here. And so basically, though, under the terms of this treaty, Britain, France, and Russia decide the fate of Greece. Britain, France, and Russia decide Greece's fate. But Greece will be independent. But what kind of independence, that shape that takes, that's going to be up to these three major powers. And so they decide for Greece, monarchy. Decided on a royal monarchy in 1830, hereditary monarchy taken from the royal families of Europe. And that monarchy had stayed intact for the next century, until they were overthrown in favor of a republic. Interesting story. Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth II's husband in England, he is actually the son of the last Greek king. He's not Greek himself, though. So look what's happening here over Europe. Greece is allowed to become independent basically because, well, the European monarchs decided Greece needs to be independent, and independent Greece is not going to upset the existing political order of Europe too much. But consider two of the major states in Central Europe, Italy and Germany. So Germany as a united country doesn't exist yet. But Italy is made up of 9 different states. Germany is made up of 38 different states. 38 little countries making up what would become Germany. All of them speaking German.
Would it be the same language, or?
It's all the same German. There'll be a couple of slight variations in slang, but basically speak German in one area, pretty much speaking German in every area.
Is that because of
Kind of like here in the United States, probably. Huh?
No, it's because of how the countries and princes and everything worked over the centuries. As Germany basically came to belong to that area. You got a question?
No, I just said probably like here in the United States, there's different accents.
Yeah, like different accents, different slang terms, like we can say Alabama and Canada or England, and same language basically. Now, Italy and Germany, they have dreams of uniting into a country. So Italy, not Italy into its own country, like had been under the Roman Empire, Germany into its own state. But it's the conservative order keeping that from happening. They want to keep things as they are, keep things as separate little countries, keep them from becoming larger powers. Basically, legitimacy. These tiny little Italian republics and principalities, all these different little German states, keep them separate. In fact, under the Germanic Confederation created under the Treaty of Vienna, the German states created a common assembly called the Federal Diet. In German, it doesn't mean what you're eating, way to lose weight. Diet means basically assembly. True story. In the late Middle Ages, there was a series of meetings held in the city in Germany called Worms. They called it the Diet because they spelled the Diet of Worms. So it looks really funny written in English.
I've heard that somewhere. I don't know.
I think we covered that last session,
Yeah.
last semester. There we go. Okay. But this one didn't meet in Worms. Actually, I think it met in Frankfurt. Don't hold me to that. Not fourth anyway. But basically, all the Germanic states, including Austria, they're Germanic state too. And so, even though a lot of these states are wanting to be unified as a larger German state, Austria doesn't, because they know they'd be looking towards Prussia to lead that unification. And so Clemens von Metternich basically has Austria do whatever it can to disrupt this Federal Diet that they're a member of, to keep Germany in as many pieces as possible.
Where is Prussia in all this?
Prussia is part of the Germanic Confederation. They're basically the big rival of Austria. Another big Germanic state. Yeah. Yeah. But in places like Britain, you have the Conservatives dominating over the Whig Party, the Reformers. Any kinds of electoral reforms are largely symbolic. In France, you have this man coming along. After the death of Louis XVIII in 1824, his brother Charles X becomes king. Yeah, Louis XVIII's brother. And essentially, Charles does whatever he can to restore the ancient regime. Basically, he above all else wants to return the clock back to 1786, back to the absolute monarchy. Basically, he didn't learn the lessons of the French Revolution. He's trying to be the sole power in France, basically trying to make sure everything that's been done by the French Revolution and by Louis XVIII is undone with one man, himself, in charge. He does not support the upper class, call that group called the ultra-royalists. They favor the absolute monarchy. But as he tries to put this in place, Charles X and the ultra-royalists are facing intense opposition across France, which actually is going to end up leading to Charles X being overthrown in 1830. Creates a very interesting situation. Of course, with Russia, you have this horrible situation. They've pretty much been devastated by the Napoleonic Wars, and they've turned very reactionary themselves. Alexander I, for example, had come to come into power in 1801 for a lot of Enlightenment ideals after his father Paul had died. His grandmother was Catherine II. His grandfather was her husband. We don't know, but let's not go there. We discussed that already. But Alexander came in as a reformer, like Peter. He had this vision like Peter the Great, coming in, instituting a lot of reforms, modernizing Russia, making it a great power in Europe, a force for change. He relaxed censorship, freed a lot of political prisoners, reformed the education system. But after Napoleon, after the French Revolution, he does a complete 180. Becomes an extreme reactionary, terrified of change, undoes all these changes, arrests people on suspicion they may be able to try to overthrow the government, criticizing the government. Heavy censorship of the Russian media. Basically, it very deeply affected him, having to leave his capital, basically having lunatics burn it to the ground, and to destroy half his country to keep Napoleon from seizing control of it. In 1825, his brother comes into power. But as soon as he comes to power, Nicholas I is facing a revolt by the military. It's been called the Decembrist Revolt. Because they rose up in December. Essentially, these soldiers believe that Nicholas I should not be in charge of trying to overthrow him in favor of another monarch, but are basically in favor of the military. Nicholas is very nearly defeated, so he marshals together what forces he can from the army, what forces are left that are loyal, and goes after the Decembrists with everything he's got, eventually surrounding the last of the resistance and destroying them, probably in 1826. And the Decembrist revolt forces him to clamp down even further than his brother had in the latter part of his term. He engineered the bureaucracy and the secret police to be able to maintain order, basically secret police to spy on the people, arrest them if necessary, try to root out any type of possible resistance to his rule. The entire government bureaucracy is designed to make sure he stays in power and order is maintained in Russia. And he's a great supporter of this idea of legitimacy in Europe as well. Like France, he favored intervention in other countries to make sure that legitimacy will be maintained, that order will be maintained, and there be no threat of uprisings or revolutions in any of these countries. No one like Napoleon would ever come to power in Europe again as Nicholas I got his way.
So the secret police like nip in the butt, basically, like, hey,
Yeah.
we got a problem over here, I'll take care of it.
Yeah, basically it's their version of Gestapo, or early version of KGB. Spying on their own people. In fact, Nicholas I is so intent on intervening in other states, actually puts down rebellions in Austria and Poland and other places, that he gets the nickname the policeman of Europe. But it's just a few of the things happening in Europe at this point. Next time we'll talk more about Latin America and talk a bit more about what's happening in France, how Charles X loses his job. So, chapter 21, 22 for next time.